Hey guys, Dan here. This is Dan Reviews It, and more specifically, Dan does Disney, which means we have Tim over on Zoom. Hello, Tim.
Hi, everybody.
It is time for yet another of the Disney True Life adventures. This one is called Secrets of Life, and I lost count. Is this what, the fourth of the full length ones?
We've done
We did The Living Desert.
Living Desert, The Vanishing Prairie, The African Lion, and then this. So yes,
And
this
then
is the fourth one.
All right. So this is the middle one because there's seven total. So we've done three. There's going to be three after this. Um, and this is one of the ones available on Disney Plus. We've talked about this before. There's only one that's not, which will be coming up a little bit later. But this one is from 1956. And like many of the other ones, this is a nature documentary directed by James Algar. He's done a bunch of them. It's narrated by Winston Hibbler, who has also done a bunch of them. And I don't really have a ton of background on this. I looked at about four different sites. The best I could come up with is that this did encourage Walt to basically create or develop at least a new miniature camera lens so they could really get into some of the very tiny creatures in this movie, which Tim will tell us about. But there's ants, there's bees. So they did develop a new miniature lens and a stroboscopic or scopic cold light. And I looked up what that meant, and I still don't really know. But it has something to do with the strobe effect, which of course we know, like the flashing lights. So it's got something to do with that, but I'm not sure in what scenes it was used. But that's something else that was developed for this movie.
Yeah, I don't know what it would be used for.
Other than, yeah, like I looked up stroboscopic is basically like the flashing lights. I'm like, okay, well, duh. I guess I could have figured that part out. Cold light, I don't know. So tech people that are more savvy than us may know what that means. But anyway, so they developed a couple of new camera items for this movie, and then Robert H. Crandall, who worked on The Living Desert a little bit with the Spider and the Wasp sequence. He is a big part here because he owned a bunch of ants and stuff. He was known as the Ant Man of Altadena in California. So he kept over 500,000 different insect specimens in his house, or in his, I don't know how many acres he had, but on his premises he had over 500,000 insect specimens. So he worked on a couple of these Disney movies, but this one he really worked closely with and loaned them the ants that were being used in the ant sequences. So that's really all I have as far as the background goes. Was there anything that you discovered, Tim?
No, not really. I couldn't really find much about this.
Okay. Yeah. So, like the other ones that we've talked about, a few of these segments did go into schools for, short films for educational purposes. Um, but yeah, I mean, by this point, 1956, the Disneyland show was up and running. So about 2 months before this premiered, they did have a special episode of Disneyland exploring some of these things and showing people, a couple of the things they can expect from the new True Life adventure. The thing I find the most interesting about this, and I guess maybe we can get a little more into this when we talk about how we felt about the movie, but I just think it's odd that the other ones sort of at least told us something about what the movie was going to be. African lion, well, that's pretty obvious. There's going to be a lion at the center of it. The Vanishing Prairie, that'll be about the prairie. The Secrets of Life tells us nothing. The poster is even more, kind of bland. It's just it's almost like a sunset kind of picture. So I went into this not knowing what it was even going to be anything about, which I thought was kind of odd. Usually Walt is pretty, forthcoming with his titles and stuff.
Well, I mean, I don't know. I can't really think of a better title for this movie. So
the bees and the ants living together. I don't know.
yeah.
But it's sort of just like, well, and so Tim's going to explain obviously what all the different segments are, but it's sort of like they just threw a bunch of stuff together, and then at the end they were like, let's do a volcano. That seems cool. And so then they did a volcano. And
Yeah.
I don't know. It's an odd documentary. All right, so let's hear about the different parts of it, Tim.
Okay, so the synopsis is, I'm just going to read what it starts off with. The first one we watched, which was The Living Desert, it had like this on-screen text explaining how we got the footage and stuff like this. This one has on-screen text as well, but it gives you a little bit of description. It says, this is an authentic story of nature's secret world, of her strange and intricate designs for survival, and her many methods of perpetuating life. And then it also tells us these intimate and unusual scenes were made possible through the development of new photographic techniques, which Dan already discussed, and through the skill and patience of many scientist photographers. And then we have our magic paintbrush again.
Yep, back again. Now, the magic paintbrush was not present, though, in all of them, right?
The magic paintbrush has been present in all of them.
Okay, I thought maybe there was one where he didn't do the bit.
It's usually just in the beginning, and
yeah, this is throughout.
This it pops up a couple times in this one as like a good transition. Yeah. This one, I feel like it kind of made it a little bit more cohesive, opposed to like the other ones. I forgot about the magic paintbrush because it was like, oh, it paints the desert, and this is where the desert is, and then it paints the prairie, and this is where the prairie, and then they paint Africa, and then it's done. this
yeah.
one, at least they used it to do transitions, but this one they needed transitions. So
yeah, they had no other way to do them, I guess.
No. So it begins with painting just the earth and explaining that there's, I don't even remember what they explained with painting of the earth. Like it's very
different stuff. There's different secrets on the earth.
Yeah. And then it shows us like the seas eroding and changing the land, and then we get into a big chunk here, like plants and seeds, like close up. We learn about wild oats, and how they kind of have they're self-planting seeds, and they kind of have legs that like kind of walk them around. And then we have what do we have? Witch hazel.
Well, they show a lot of flowers opening and closing.
Oh yeah, we get that as well. Witch hazel, it shoots 30 feet, so it's not in its shadow. And then we talk about pine cones, and they if there's a forest fire, they heat up and they kind of like shoot out, so that they can regrow. And I thought that was interesting. But then it does.
Yeah.
Then it just kind of becomes not educational and doesn't even tell us anything about what we're watching. And it shows us a bunch of time lapse, like growing flowers and ripening and blooming. And I mean, they're pretty shots. And they're very smooth for time lapse. Like usually like time lapse are kind of like choppy and stuff like that, but they're very smooth shots. But the narrator's not telling us anything about the flowers that we're looking at for the most part.
And for like minutes too.
Yeah, it was a good, I had to watch this in 2 sections because these flowers and seed section was putting me to sleep. And I was just like, oh, the classical. I realized I was like 15 minutes into the movie. I'm like, wait, there's 15 minutes so far of this movie. It's just like flowers and seeds and slow motion and like,
the classical music behind that montage. Yes, I could see how if you were tired, it would be putting you to sleep. I mean, it's this like lovely lilting classical music set to flowers going into bloom, in time lapse. Like I mean, you would make a YouTube video today, and a person might put that on to put them to sleep. You know, like it's almost designed in our day and age, like it would be designed for that.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful to
Yeah.
look at, but it's a little sleepy.
Yeah.
And then we get to a little bit more information. They go into corn for a while. I thought that was very interesting as well. They talk about how corn fertilizes itself and how you get the there's like little flowery things at the top and falls down to the silks of the corn, and then that kind of fertilizes that, and that's how we get like corn seeds and how you actually get
Yeah,
corn.
that was.
I never knew. But
Yeah.
and then we have the magic paintbrush, and it goes into pollination, and we talk about honeybees and how they're the master of pollination, and then how different flowers have different tricks to get their pollen onto the bees or other insects. They keep saying other insects, but they only really show us honeybees or bees because those are the ones that really do most of the pollination.
Yeah.
They talk about one of the deadly plants, which is like the scorpion plant that tricks the honeybee to like crawl into it. Talk about
How about the bee that ate its way out?
Oh yeah.
That was pretty cool.
Yeah, it closes up on it, and then it has to kind of force itself out so that it gets pollen on it. Talk about how rain's bad for bees, but if you saw the bee movie, you knew that already.
Yes. Sadly, this is I hate thinking about a world before the bee movie existed, but
we got talk about queens, wax makers, honeycombs. No one really knows how bees actually make honey, which I thought was interesting. I mean, at the time of this movie, I don't know if that's changed.
Yeah.
And then the probably
I would think it has in 60 years. I think we figured that out.
Maybe.
But I don't know.
And then we talk about how we get new queens for hives, and this is where we have probably one of the most actiony scenes in this. That we have when a queen hatches, it then has to take out all the other queens or potential queens that they all make a bunch at the same time, just so they would have one in case something happens. She has to take out all the other ones. So if another one hatches while she hasn't finished taking out all of her competition, they have like a battle, and they just keep stinging.
A bee off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we talk about drone bees, and then we see what happens when there's a forest fire with bees. And we move into our ants, and they make a little segue because there's such thing as honeypot ants, and they show us honeypot ants, which were really weird looking ants, which I've never heard of. But and then they just transition.
I never heard of that. Yeah.
But I feel like they only use them to make the segue from honeybees to honey ants, and then they're like, okay, those are the honeypot ants, and we're going to just move on to normal ants, and they talk about leaf cutters and hunter ants and harvesters, and then we have an ant battle, which is the second and probably last action scene of the movie, which is red ants versus black ants, and
there's a little action with the worm later on, I guess, the worm and the ants, but I don't know if that's maybe actiony.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's probably in the same section, because right after the battle with the red and the black ants, the black ants take on the blind worm or whatever it's called.
Yeah, that's true. I guess that is all the same thing.
Yeah, but I mean, the shots that they got for the ant battles were pretty impressive. They have a lot of footage of that, and the carnage of the ants is pretty graphic.
Now, how about when that one dude just takes the other ants' two heads and just carries them around as his trophies?
Yeah.
That was pretty wild.
I don't know if he carried them around as trophies. I think it was the fact that the ants were like pinched onto him, and then they lost their heads, and then he just kept going on with 2 ant heads attached to him.
Yeah, I guess that's what it was. Maybe he wasn't boasting about it, but like, yeah, that was pretty wild, dude. He just ripped those ants' heads off in the battle, and then he just kept them.
Yeah. And then we get our magic paintbrush to do a nice transition into the world of water and the weird creatures that live in the sea that are not even the sea, but just in water that have strange, I guess, mating habits or ways to hunt. We get this stickleback fish, which is the male fish makes the nest, and then he also cares for the eggs that the female lays in the nest because she'll eat them. And then he also takes care of the young, which is his method is when they swim away, he swallows them up and then spits them back into the nest.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, and then
more good shots underwater.
Yeah, the underwater shots were really great as well. You have the dragonfly in Nip stage, which is really deadly to fish apparently, and then you have the diving spider, which I thought was actually really good footage of this diving spider, which was it dives down and makes this air bubble, or like holds the air bubble with its legs, and then kind of makes an air pocket underwater so that it can like live in that air pocket, which is I've never heard of this creature, and
that was cool.
The footage they have of that was really great. And then we have the archer fish, which kind of spits water at insects above the water and just kind of shoots them down to them. And then we go into the actual sea. We have a lot of shots of jellyfish, and then we have the anglerfish, which has like this little fleshy thing on a pole that kind of looks like a worm, and he just like moves around. Basically goes fishing for other fish. You have the decorator crab, which pastes foliage on his body so he can camouflage in. You have the fiddler crab, which he has one oversized claw, which makes him look really funny. And I guess this is the one time that they had a little bit of humor in the movie where they kind of he's trying to like get the female's attention. And then we have the grunions, which shows their mating ritual. And I know about grunions because I've seen Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter's Dead.
Okay, that's where I know about grunions. I was like, the whole time I'm like, wait, I know about grunions, and I didn't look it up, but I was like, how do I know so much about grunions? It's from Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter's Dead, my movie.
Yep.
Okay.
As soon as
the grunion run.
Yeah, as soon as they started talking about grunions, I was like, oh. But apparently, the information you get from Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter's Dead is slightly incorrect. Because in that movie, they say that the male and the female are never at the same time. But they actually are.
Right. Okay. Well, I would assume that the true life adventure is probably more accurate on the details.
About the grudge.
Or maybe we learn more about them in the 90s. I don't know.
Yeah. And then it ends with what Dan says is about the volcanoes. For some reason, we talk about volcanoes and there's footage of the volcanoes. And I think it's basically because even though that there is destruction, it is ultimately making new crust for the earth, which is another secret of life.
It's a big secret.
Yeah, because volcanic soil is very fertile, I believe. And that's how we end the movie. I feel it's very hodgepodgey slapped together.
Yeah, it's like very much. So, okay, what's interesting for me about this is I probably got more information out of it than a lot of the other ones, solely because I don't know a lot about ants and stuff and the sea creatures we talked about, I didn't know much about. Like, I feel like most of the ones up to this point have dealt with mainly like big animals and in the wild and stuff. And these are just everyday animals that we never get to see this up close. Even today, I mean, I don't remember the last time we saw a documentary about ants or bees or something that really showed that in such great detail of the ants and stuff like that. But it was all so like, A, like you said, hodgepodge, but B, it's all very like dry and kind of flat. And you said there's like that one part of a little bit of humor, but that really was about it. They weren't doing the bits with the orchestration. I feel like I just froze. But yeah, it's just very, I don't know. It was interesting to see the different creatures, but it just doesn't seem like a movie. It just seems like a bunch of shorts that they kind of threw together because they were like, well, we're not doing the shorts series anymore. They're features now, so let's all just throw them together.
Yeah, I mean, the first one was a bunch of shorts that they kind of, and even the second one was kind of a bunch of shorts that they kind of looped together, but there was an overarching theme of the location.
Yeah.
Where this one, it didn't have that. So it kind of felt a little lackluster, but the footage is great. It is beautifully shot. I feel like some of this footage is probably the best footage of the true life adventures that we've seen so far. Like how just the clarity of it and how miniature these animals are, and you're like, oh, these are like picture perfect shots of these ants and these bees and like the close-ups of the plants and the seeds and everything growing. It's very beautiful, and even the underwater shots is really great. Like you compare those underwater shots to stuff like even like 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, like these are better. Like,
yeah, it's even more clear. Yeah, absolutely.
Clear. And yes, the information is very informative, but I feel like all of them have had that. It's just that these are a little bit more odd animals. But even with the other ones, there were some animals that I've never heard of, learned information about. It was just like, oh yeah, we know about lions, and like, okay, we learned a little bit more about lions, but we knew some about lions.
Right.
I knew
that's how I felt about it.
Yeah, I knew some stuff about ants and bees, but everything else that they talked about, like I was like, oh, okay, here's an archerfish. I've never heard about that, but I don't know. I feel like because it doesn't have that central theme, it's a little disjointed.
Yeah, in fact, that's last comment I wrote, Tim, was disjointed overall, because that's exactly how this movie feels. And also the other thing I thought, I don't know how much this detracts from it because it is real animals and real creatures, but this movie has just some of the ugliest creatures and most like off-putting. Like an ant is not an attractive creature, and I feel like in every one of the other movies we've gotten some really like gorgeous creatures, and ants are certainly interesting, and some of the the fish they have are interesting, but they're not very attractive to look at. And I wonder if that's maybe why they started off with all of the beautiful flowers and the foliage and stuff like that.
Maybe, but I feel like we've had flower shots in other ones as well. Which one was that? I think maybe it was the prairie. It kind of ended with flowers, I think, or maybe something like that. But like you said, yes, we've had either it was the prairie dogs or it was, I mean, lions are even with the lions, you're like, oh, these are fierce animals, but then they would show you the baby lions or the baby coyotes. And then you had like the kangaroo rat. Even though he's a rat, he was very cute and furry.
He's still cute, yeah.
And you would have at least a cute animal that you're like, okay. And that's kind of how our discussions have been in the past, like you don't really care about the fact that the wasp killed the spider or that coyote ate the snake, because no one cares about the snake or the spider or something like that, because people are afraid of those and don't like those animals. Most people don't like bees. Most people don't like ants. So
right.
it's hard.
And that was the whole movie. I feel like that's why they had to bookend it with the beautiful flowers and then the cool looking volcano at the end, and then explain that like volcanoes aren't really bad and whatever. But like, yeah, I mean, it's very beautiful footage. The micro lenses they use obviously capture some really cool stuff. The underwater stuff really made me wish Disney did a full length underwater documentary, because I don't think there is one in the whole series.
No, you have to wait until Disney Nature does Oceans, which is,
and that's what 50 years, 60 years later or something.
Yeah.
And at the time, Jacques Cousteau was making a lot of underwater stuff, so maybe Disney didn't want to compete. I don't know, but I mean, not having seen any of the Jacques Cousteau stuff, really, I can't imagine that the camera action is better in that than it is here. I mean, the stuff he captures, these camera people capture underwater, is astounding.
Yeah, it's like what we talked about Davy Croc the other day, and I said, oh, the alligator looked a little bit better, but I mean, this puts us to shame. It's like,
oh yeah,
yeah.
I mean, that's like playtime compared to this.
Yeah.
So yeah, I did not actually love the time lapse footage as much as you did, I think. I thought it was okay for the time, but I think seeing it today, it does look pretty choppy.
I thought some of it was a little choppy,
at least for some of it.
Some of it was a little choppy, but I felt like for the most part, it was pretty smooth.
The stuff with the seeds, I think, was the most smooth. Like when we saw the seeds, go on the ground and then their little legs, start walking or whatever. I thought that was a little bit more fluid than the flowers opening and closing, that montage. Yeah.
But I still thought it was pretty.
But I think certainly for the time, it was probably pretty great. But maybe I'm spoiled because we've seen so many advances in that particular kind of thing. But you have to imagine, right? They probably sat there for days and days, trying to get all the right angles, and to put it together in the 50s is certainly impressive.
Yeah.
All right, so I mean, I feel like we've talked about pretty much everything. Like the other ones, this only got a DVD release in like the collection form of the greatest true life adventures or whatever, that is long out of print, but you can get it on Disney Plus. I assume you can rent it on Amazon as well for like $3 or something, like most of the other ones. But did you have any other thoughts before we talk about grades?
No, I think I mentioned everything I wrote down here.
Yeah, I think we're pretty much on the same page with this. I mean, I thought it was cool, but it's not really a movie. It's just a bunch of, I can see this is probably the easiest one they had to break up to take it to the schools.
Yeah.
The bees, the volcano, the ants, and the flowers. That's it.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Like for me, this is probably like a B minus type of thing.
I was thinking B minus, because even though the footage is
okay,
really good and it is informative, and you do learn some stuff, but it is too disjointed and there's no overarching story. I think in the last two movies, they were like, oh, we kind of learned how to make it feel like a full movie. Like the first did feel a little disjointed, but at least you had the overarching theme that it was the living desert.
Right.
The last the last half of The Prairie, you focused on the prairie dog and how different animals interacted with the prairie dog, and you kind of like went away with it. It was like you're like, oh, here's the coyote, and here's the coyote with the prairie dog. And then the last one that you had the lion, and that was the central theme. But then you kind of went on some tangents, but you always went back to that lion. This one you didn't have that, and I thought they kind of learned how that they were going to do these, but this was a total miss on that part.
Yeah, you can see why this is not one of the ones that got nominated for an Oscar. You can see why this is not one of their more highly regarded ones. I mean, it is cool though to see ants. Like we never really ever in nature documentaries see ants up close and personal doing their business. Like that was pretty cool.
Yeah, it has cool footage, but doesn't have a good story.
Yeah, I can agree with a B- on this. I can be with you on that. All right, so we have, like I said, 3 more of these, but they are scattered throughout. Up next, we're gonna do Westward Ho! The Wagons, which you've already seen. I have to watch that one. And then after that is Johnny Tremaine, which is not on Disney Plus, and I don't have the DVD, so that we will get to in the new year. Maybe we'll rent it from Amazon. Maybe I'll see if I can get the DVD from the Disney Movie Club. And then right after that, we have our next nature one, Perry, about the it's a bird or something, right?
No, squirrel. I'm looking forward to it.
Oh, the squirrel, Perry the squirrel. Yes, how could I forgot? But that one is on Disney Plus, so we can watch that one as well. All right, thanks for joining, Tim.
You're welcome. Bye, everybody.
And we'll see everybody next time. Bye.